Okay. Good morning. We're going to talk something not our usual, something different, about a question that came up before and over Pesach, and that was it turns out that there's a number of distributors for beer and certain other alcoholic beverages on the East Coast. There's a three-tiered system for how alcohol is distributed in many states, and that is three-tiered means there's a manufacturer, there's a distributor, and then there's a retailer, and so then those three are not the same. They're not the same person, and the distributor, in a number of places, is a Jewish person. Which is to say is when you're a distributor, the way it works in that industry is when you're the distributor for, we'll pick a brand, Coors. If you're a distributor for Coors in Cook County or in New York, if you call it in Rockland County, then you're the only person who sells it in that area. Anybody who sells Coors in Cook County or in Rockland County, that person is buying it from you. Which is to say is, so now we have a potential question of how much of alav Pesach, which is to say is, Chazal asur if a Yid owns chametz over Pesach, Chazal asur that chametz forever. And the question is whether, if a Yid owns it, was the distributor, and he had a certain amount of stock over Pesach, whether that chametz should be, asur. Okay, that's the question to talk about. And there's a whole to-do happened about it. It's been going on in the East Coast for a couple of years, and particularly in this year, in a particular way that it happened, there was an extra attention paid to that thing. Okay, so just first, before I talk about the issue that came up with this person, I'm going to pause for a second just to step on the side and talk about chametz alav Pesach. As I mentioned, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, chametz alav Pesach. Why did Chazal ask for chametz alav Pesach? They asked it because they wanted to punish somebody. They wanted to make or encourage people to do the right thing. It's hard to get rid of your chametz. Since it's hard to get rid of your chametz, people would want to hold on to it. And they maybe wouldn't eat it on Pesach, but they want to hold on to it. So Chazal said, well, ask for your chametz unless you get rid of it. And that's a big incentive for people to do the right thing, to get rid of their chametz. Until not so long ago, the idea that people would avoid the issue of Bar Yirah by selling the chametz, that was not a typical way of dealing with things. The Makar that you could do such a thing, to sell your chametz to avoid Bar Yirah, is a Tosefta. Tosefta says it in a situation where a person was on a boat, and it was Pesach, and he realized he had chametz back at home, so there's nothing he could do about the chametz that he had back at home, so he couldn't get to it to do regular traditional beer on it, so what could he do? So he sold it to a guy. Okay, that's the kind of situation that it was used for when the person was stuck. Later, when Yidden got into the business of whiskey and things like that, which are chametz and which you have to hold for many years, and it's worth a lot of money, so they started doing that more commonly. Those kind of people started doing Mechiras chametz. But eventually, at this point, come on, everybody does Mechiras chametz. They say, hey, why do I have to bother getting rid of my cookies? I could just sell them. Get rid of that. I'll avoid Bar Yirah by selling. Okay, and that was good news and bad news. Okay, the good news, of course, is it makes it easy for people to avoid Bar Yirah. The bad news is that people have taken advantage of it. The exact people who Chazal wanted to punish or encourage by making it asur, those people are saying is, that person wants to own a store, which is what we're going to talk about. He wants to run a business that sells chametz. He wants to not make his food asur. He said, no problem, I'll just sign the paper, go to the rabbi, sign a piece of paper, and you finished, you solved the whole problem. Okay? Or in his mind at least, he solved the whole problem. He avoided the whole potential, that punishment that's hanging over his head, which is the food's going to be asur forever. No problem, you just have to sign a piece of paper, and you just keep running your business as usual. Okay? So people took that thing that's really like, so to speak, for a shas atchad, and they use it not only to help themselves, that if I personally want to keep my box of Cheerios, but also to run a business and deal with chametz the whole Pesach in the way Chazal specifically did not want you to. Okay.
Anything? Is this a hashkafic issue that it's just not within what the Ruts and Torah really wanted? It's like a loophole that we're finding, or is this something? Are we saying that somebody is really a halachic problem over here?
No, I'm talking hashkafa. I'm saying it like this: when Chazal made the issue of chametz alav Pesach, they were trying to stop exactly those people. If they would have realized that a guy could get around that by making chametz by making Mechiras chametz, just by signing a piece of paper, and if we get around the whole thing, would they have extended the risk? Maybe they would have. We're not going to extend it. We can't. Just we can imagine that's exactly the person who they were trying to get. That was exactly the guy that they weren't trying to get me and you. Me and you, they knew if we weren't allowed to have chametz, we'd get rid of it. So for us, we'd just be nice. We're taking advantage of Mechiras chametz. But those people are taking advantage in an inappropriate way. They're taking advantage in the way Chazal would have wanted to stop them. We can't.
Well, there's no issue. Maybe they wouldn't have wanted.
No. The guy's running a business, owning chametz, doing everything he wants. So this guy is running a business with chametz. That's exactly what Chazal didn't want.
That's for sure.
Right. Whether does it fit? He wants it. Does it technically? Can we find? And we'll talk about whether there's any technicalities of his. Did he do anything wrong? But in my point here from the hashkafa side.
It's like Ramesh's Shabbos clocks, that idea that Ramesh says like you shouldn't use Shabbos clocks because it would have been around in the time of the Chazal would have...
Here it's more than that. Here the Chazal made a specific takana for that person. That's exactly who they were after when they made this takana. This isser of chametz over Pesach was exactly for that kind of person who would want to keep chametz and would not be strong enough to avoid, to do the right thing. If you didn't have such a good for yourself, you get rid of your chametz. That's what you would do.
So he's doing it. He's getting rid of his chametz. He's getting rid of his chametz himself.
He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's running a business, selling chametz all Pesach.
But it's not his.
Okay. We'll continue on now. That I'll just mention in passing. We're not going to talk about it. There's a shayla l'chreinim whether that isser of chametz over Pesach applies to a person who's a mumar. Okay, it's a person. We have a person who doesn't pay any attention to what Chazal says. He completely ignores the dinim. So maybe in that case, there's no isser of chametz over Pesach. Why? If the isser is only to punish people and say, if you don't do the right thing, your food's going to be usher forever. So maybe that doesn't mean anything. Maybe Chazal wouldn't have said that when they were talking about a person who doesn't care what they say. So you'll say it's usher. That won't stop him. Won't make any difference if he... What? There are those who talk about it. In the paper. In the Zechitzah, he says it's not true. Okay, there's a who talk about it, who say that maybe it should be true. Maybe there's such a tzad that for a moment doesn't apply. From the angle of either, because I wouldn't have meant to ask that person, or the only person who's being punished by that, the only person who's being punished by your saying that it should be usher is me, the from person. The guy who did the wrong thing, he couldn't care less, do whatever he wanted. Okay, but on the other hand, if you think about it in our situation, the whole idea may not be true. The whole thought that maybe a mumar shouldn't apply to is not true when we're talking about a store, because there the from customers won't come to the store. So there, the isser on his chametz over Pesach, Taka may encourage him to do the right thing. Not because he cares, not because he's a person who's going to go home and say, oh, if the rabbi said I shouldn't eat it, I won't eat it. Not because of that, but because he knows for business it's not good. When they put up a name that says, don't shop in this store, then that hurts him and maybe that will encourage him to do the right thing. So, kids over here would apply. Okay, that's not really what we're here to talk about mainly. So let's go back to our beer company. Okay, the beer company, the beer, it seems, is a more complicated situation than other things, which is like this. If we had a regular distributor for chametz, okay, let's say someone who distributes cookies, okay, and that person is a Jewish person. So, he owned chametz over Pesach, and he did nothing about it, he owned chametz over Pesach, that chametz is usher. But for me, the consumer, it's very hard for me to put my finger on which is the chametz that he owned over Pesach. Which means I don't buy from the distributor, I buy from the supermarket. When I go to the supermarket, did that supermarket own these cookies before Pesach? In which case it's mutter. They didn't get it from the distributor. Did the distributor own it over Pesach? In which case it's usher, because it's chametz over Pesach. Or maybe the store got it from a shipment that the distributor himself got after Pesach, in which case it would be mutter. Okay, so for me, it's very hard for me to know whether the cookies that I'm looking at on the shelf are they mutter or usher. How am I supposed to know? There's possibilities that the Yid owned it, the distributor owned it over Pesach, and there's possibilities that he didn't. To the point that I might not be able to know anything, and I might be able to even say, something to on the cooler. If this is I have no way of figuring out whether the cookies in front of me are the ones that the distributor had on Pesach or didn't have it. It could be my store had it before Pesach, or it could be the distributor got it after Pesach, or it could be the distributor had it on Pesach. Okay, so in a regular distributor, the question is a little bit minimized because it's hard to track it. But by the beer, things are more complicated for the following reason. It seems that the people who distribute beer hold the erech 6 weeks worth of stock of the major brands that they hold. Okay, so I mentioned you Coors before, it's a big brand. So the distributor is holding 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks worth of how much beer of Coors he needs to distribute. So if he distributes 1 million cases a week, it means he has 4, 5, 6 million cases sitting in his warehouse. Now, the stores, on the other hand, the supermarkets, the people who sell beer, those people have 1 week's worth of stock. Okay? It seems, I know it sounds funny, but it seems that now the baseball season has started, they have even less than a week. They sell their beer faster. Okay? So they have even less than a week's worth of beer. So that means to say it's like this. The day Pesach ends, if I walk into the supermarket, was this beer belong to the supermarket before Pesach? Not so likely. Okay, at this point, the beer is here. Remember, they hold a week's worth of stock. That means is what they have today, they probably got delivered on Pesach. Okay? What's the chances that this beer belonged at the distributor on Pesach? Very high. The distributor's got 4 to 6 weeks worth of stock. That means it's from Pesach till, I don't know, Lag B'Omer or close to Shavuos, it's pretty for sure that the beer that's in the supermarket came from the distributor. Okay? Remember, it's not, when we have a regular piece of flour, we have spaghetti, the spaghetti, I have no idea whether the spaghetti was at this distributor on Pesach, or was by the manufacturer, or was by the store. I don't know who had it on Pesach. But by the beer, because just for the way the distribution business works, that they hold so much stuff, it makes the problem that much more complicated. It makes it harder to say there's a suffix when this came into the store, because there's just the way the business runs, it's very hard to say that. Okay. So a few years ago, in Baltimore, they realized that the distributor in their area was a Jewish family, and they helped this person make a mechira to sell his chametz. We'll talk about that in a second, whether that's good or not. But they also told their stores, the people who, or their caterers, the people who use beer, they told them, before Pesach, you need to stock up on beer. Think about how much you need for, I don't know how many weeks, 4, 6, 7 weeks. I don't know how many weeks they told them they have to stock up for. Stock up on beer from before Pesach, because we don't want you to buy any of the stuff on Pesach. Okay, you need to stock up before Pesach. And that's what they did. So the stores had to say that. They all bought up enough how much they needed for this many weeks after Yom Tov, and then they didn't buy again until they could be confident that the stuff had passed through was not by the distributor. Okay. For some reason, nobody had paid attention to the distributor in the New York area. There's a big distributor in the New York area, and that person was Jewish. He's Jewish. His parents, if I understand correctly, his grandparents were Shomer Shabbos. He's a person who his parents lived through World War II, and he was born either here or in Europe right after World War II, and he's owned this company for a zillion years. I mean, he's like, where have you guys been until now? Like, how come no one thought of this? Where have you guys been? He speaks Yiddish. Anyhow, so where have you guys been? But this person, there's this whole to-do to get this person. They found out the person is a Jewish person. So there were 2 different approaches for how to deal with these people. Most of the people, I'm going to tell it over to you in the way that the person says it. The person who in the end helped out with the Mechira, his name is Rabbi Weinfeld. He works at the OK. He's a Lubavitcher Chassid. So he told me, he said the Lubavitcher Rebbe has 2, he says there's 2 different mitzvahs on Purim. Okay? One mitzvah is the mitzvah of Matanas Avyonim. One mitzvah is Mishloach Manos. So mitzvah Matanas Avyonim means is that you look at a person and he's not doing what he's supposed to, and you say to him, you're an Efyon. Do you know what happens to people who don't do mitzvahs? He says, you're going to burn. You're going to be punished. The Moshe's going to get you for not doing the right thing. You look at the guy and you say, Matanas Avyonim, look at you worthless person who does nothing. And if you keep acting like this, you know what your end is going to be if you keep acting like this. And then this Mishloach Manos Yisrael Yehu, they say to the person, if you would do mitzvahs, you would become such a better person. You would be so fine. And you talk to them on a positive sense. And of course, the Rebbe was encouraging people to do the Mishloach Manos version, rather than Matanas Avyonim. So there were lots of people doing the Matanas Avyonim version. They said to the person, you should know if you don't sell your chametz, we're going to tell everybody not to buy from you. They even were talking about going to the manufacturers to say, manufacturers, you should know that your distributor is going to mess you up. Because of your distributor, we're not going to sell enough beer during Pesach. You should know that's what's going to happen. So they were coming from that side of it. And he decided, I'm going to do the Mishloach Manos version. He literally did that. I'm not kidding. He called up his mother. His mother lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he asked her how he could bake Kashrus cake. And he came to the guy's house with the Kashrus cake. It's a whole story. Not for today what he did. A whole story. He came with a Kashrus cake that he made himself. His mother was very upset at him. He told him, he said, please finish this before Pesach. His mother was upset that he was making kakash cake so close to Pesach. And he went to a whole story. This guy, he's a very interesting person, if you know him. But he went to bring him his kakash cake, and he schmoozed him, and he convinced him. And at the end, after they made the Mechira, as you probably heard by now, at the end of the Mechira, he got him put on tefillin. It was his first time in 57 years since his bar mitzvah. It was a whole, he became very good friends with this guy, etc. Okay. That's what they did. They made a Mechira before Pesach. They did a Mechira, and everything was they thought everything was wonderful. Came when Pesach ended, or as Pesach was ending, other people put out notices that said, "You guys think that that you heard that this Jewish person owns a company. You think that they sold their chametz. Don't buy their beer. Okay, don't buy. Instead, you should buy these other brands that distribute themselves or don't use him." Okay, so let's talk about some of the shilos that there were about whether you should buy the beer, or you could buy it, or you couldn't. Okay. So the first is, someone suggested, maybe beer is not chametz alav Pesach. Maybe beer, and he had two reasons why beer shouldn't be considered chametz alav Pesach. Okay. The first is, he said, is the Mishmur talks about whether if a person has something that just has the tam of chametz in it, whether that's chametz alav Pesach. Well, what's the question? The question is that in order to be chametz alav Pesach, it has to be you from Bal Yirah. So he says maybe not from Bal Yirah just for the tam of chametz, and then you could be makel that the chametz should be mutter after Pesach. Okay, that's what someone suggested. Okay, so it's not correct. It's not correct. In fact, it turns out the Mishnah in the third paragraph of Pesachim is the Mishnah. The paragraph is called El Ovrim. Okay, it's called El Ovrim because El Ovrim. These are the things that if you have them, you're over on Bal Yirah for having them. Okay, El Ovrim b'Pesach. Okay, it's put in Simon Tafin days. And one of the cases in that Mishnah, the Mishnah lists a bunch of things that you're over on Bal Yirah for having, and one of them is Sheikh Ramadi. Okay, that's beer. Okay, that's our beer, Sheikh Ramadi. Regular Sheikh is what we've been talking about in our regular show. That's made out of dates. But Sheikh Ramadi means it's made out of barley. And it's one of the things, Mamash and Mishnah, El Ovrim b'Pesach, you're over on Bal Yirah is if you have Sheikh Ramadi. The Aruch HaShulchan says it's true, that Mishnah is true even if you don't hold the tam kicker. He says because it's mamash the chametz itself. It's the thing itself is mixed into it. It's not so clear if that's true because when you make beer, you take out the barley at the end. The barley, you make the beer from it, but the barley itself gets pulled out at the end. He says, nah, that doesn't count. Really, the beer is mamash in there. He connects it to a Gemara. The Gemara says in Chulin, if a person takes himchehu v'gamoy, if you liquefy chametz and then you drink it, the Gemara brings a pasuk that you're over eating chametz on Pesach. If you liquefy chametz and you drink it, so he says that this is an example of that. Again, it's not so clear because over here the actual barley got taken out, but it's a Mishnah that it's Oscar. Okay, that's one side of it. The other thing the person said is, wait a second. He says the beer is only 5% alcohol. So beer is only 5%. There's another thing. You're only over the only chametz of Pesach if you're over on Bal Yirah, and that requires that you have to have a kazayas of chametz in each. You have to have a kazayas of chametz in each. We'll say in each container. Okay. Well, maybe in each bottle of beer, if it's only 5% of chametz, maybe 5% of chametz is not going to be a kazayas in each bottle. If it's not a kazayas, then you did the wrong thing to have it.
Sugar.
What do you say? So the first, of course, the mistake was, of course, 5% is the alcohol. Okay, 5% is the alcohol, is not the beer, not the barley in it. Okay, that's a mistake. But it turns out, Rabbi Nias helped me in getting some formulations for beers, and it turns out that the person's argument was, he says, well, it's a lot of water, which is true. There's a lot of water in there. Okay, so it turns out that if you look through the formulations, it turns out that the formulas for beer are in a bottle, a 12-ounce can. In a 12-ounce can, if you were to divide it between how much was barley and how much was water at the beginning, it comes out to between 2 and 3 ounces of that are barley, and the other rest of the number 9 or 10 would have been water, and it's in the original mix. Okay, so and that of course is.
They take out most of the stuff.
They take out
the barley.
No. We're trying to look. Is this mixture? The first question was they take out the barley. I just put that on the side. Check on the inside. Now the question is, but maybe the original mixture was such that
Extract stuff from the barley.
the barley sits there, it ferments into
And it's
beer.
liquefies?
It's a liquid. Well, and then they take out the psoils. They take out the pieces at the end.
But did you take out themselves and did you calculations?
Uncount that psoil. I'm not sure if we can do that, because what's the liquid that we have? The liquid that we have is...
It's going to be it's going to be too little.
No, the liquid that we have. The liquid is stuff that came out of the barley, okay? So that counts as its full amount. It is what it is. It's the fact that we pull the psoils out into it is not going to take away from it. If we do that, we come up with almost zero barley there. But it's not the truth, okay? It doesn't taste like water. There's something in there. It's like it has a tom to it. Okay?
That's not so his argument is volumetrically not having enough.
I don't think you count it like that. I think you count it by looking at how much was in the original mixture. The original mixture was, in this case, comes out to 1 part barley, 5 parts water.
So a pound of barley equals a pound of barley?
That's what I would think so. I think that's correct. Okay. Okay. But the truth is that I think that whole argument is a mistake, and it's a mistake for the following reason. I think it's a mistake for the following reason. Okay. When we talk about when something is a tarubas and whether there's a kazayas and things like that, that makes sense when we would say there's chametz and there's heter, let's say, or there's isser and there's heter. We could talk about is there kazayas in this bottle or is there not kazayas? Okay, I made ketchup. The ketchup has vinegar and 10 other ingredients. So if the vinegar was the chametz, we say is there kazayas in the package or is there not a kazayas? That's a reasonable question. Over here, it's not like that. The water is not heter. Okay, the water is chametz. Barley is not chametz. Barley and water is chametz. So it's not that there's barley, isser, and water that's heter. No. Barley and water together is isser. It's like by basar b'cholov we say that there's chtichnas is nevela mitaraisa, because the basar and the cholov, that's what the isser is. It's not that the basar is the isser and the cholov is heter, which say chanan on it. That the barley and the water is not isser and heter. It's isser and isser. It's them together is isser. I said this because when you put barley and water together. Barley and water, there's no...
Red barley became both this chametz. It's chametz. The water is not the chametz.
That's what we have together. We now put barley and water together. We put barley and water together. And now what we have together, that's chametz. This thing is chametz. The thing is, it's like, if I put basar and cholov together, it's like...
I agree. They're staying in the title.
The piece of bread is bigger than the volume of the flour. Because there's water in there. Is it cool as chametz or not cool?
Of course it's chametz.
So whenever it went to the barley, it was machmis the barley, that's chametz. But the rest of the water is sitting there, that's only tatam, that's not chametz.
Okay, why is the barley more chametz than the water? It's the combination of the two.
Chametz means no, the chametz and chametz means no, not water.
Doesn't come into contact with water.
Right.
That's chametz. So
Not that the water, it's a combination. The water is machmis the dogon. The water is
and what you're seeing in front of you is what was made by those two things together. That's what you have in front of you. You don't have
the water is not chametz.
Okay. I don't think that's correct. That's fine. But I did it because I agree with that. Okay, we can argue that. Okay, one last point on this piece is that there were those who said that this whole shaila doesn't apply. I'm just here to correct the mistake. This whole question doesn't apply to a certain beverage called Smirnoff Ice. Okay, it doesn't apply to Smirnoff Ice because Smirnoff Ice is not chametz. Okay, and there was a whole explanation for that. They said, I'm going to tell you what it is in a second, and they said, we heard information that this and this and this and this and this, and I said that didn't sound right because Smirnoff Ice it's a malt beverage. Malt beverage, we've talked about it in our regular alcoholic beverage shiur. Malt beverage means they need beer, basically it's beer, but they don't put hops into it. Okay, malt beverage means is beer without hops into it. In this case, they flavor it, so it's green apple ice. Okay, but they flavor it with something else. They don't put hops into it, but basically it's beer. It's plain old beer. And they had said it based on mistaken information, and they said they're going to correct this next year. Okay. What?
Smirnoff Ice, not vodka.
That's correct. It's not vodka. I said it's beer. Smirnoff Ice is a malt beverage.
So why isn't it chametz?
It says a beer.
It is chametz. It's a mistake. It's a mistake. It was a mistake. Now, in other countries, Smirnoff Ice is vodka, but in this country it's not, and maybe that's how they ended up with a mistake. They got the information from somebody, and it was a mistake. They're correcting it for next year. I'm just mentioning it now because people were told that it's okay, and it was really a mistake. Okay.
What was the Facebook on the whole Mechiras?
I can get to Mechiras. I'm comfortable. I can get to Mechiras.
I think why some might be mutter. I never heard why it should be usher yet.
I can about to say that. Well, the time was maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe it's out of the comments. Unless they were talking about apples, so we say, what's the shaila? This is the distributor primarily of beer and certain, again, little other alcoholic beverages like Smirnoff Ice, like little things like that. But basically, it's a beer type thing. Okay. So, the question that most people talked about, which we'll spend just a minute on, there's not so much to say about it. Okay, the thing that most people talked about is, what happens if a person did Mechiras chametz, like this person did, he sold his chametz, but he continued to run his business like regular on Pesach. Okay, what happens if I won't say like this person. If a person did Mechiras chametz and he ran his business like usual. Okay, the case that it came up with most prominently 50 years ago was there was a supermarket chain called Wallbaum's, and Mrs. Julia Wallbaum's was a Jewish lady, and she owned this chain, and she ran her business like regular on Pesach. Okay, but she did Mechiras chametz. So the shaila was, are you allowed to buy chametz in that store after Pesach? Okay, so the question, and that question would relate to these distributors. The person, if he's a distributor and he does Mechiras chametz, so does that person, is his chametz that he ran a business on Pesach, is that chametz, does his Mechiras chametz do any good? He did Mechiras chametz, he said, I saw my chametz. If I saw my chametz, then everything should be wonderful. You say, no, he ran a business on Pesach. Okay, so there are different arguments as to why that should not be good. Okay, so the people who want to be mekel, they come from, you're not the only one, but most famously from Rav Moshe. There's two chuvas in Rav Moshe about this thing. And Rav Moshe says, if the person did a mechira, he wants to avoid Isser as much as he can. That's why he did a mechira. He wants to avoid Isser. The fact that he ran his business is just because he couldn't give up on the money that he was going to earn, but as much as he could, he wants to avoid Isser, and therefore the mechira for the parts, the things that he has in his store, the mechira works. The mechira works. The fact that other parts, those he stole from the guy, but the mechira that he did is a good mechira and it works. So Moshe says, but the things that he sold on Pesach, those were stolen from the guy, those are, of course are usher. The things that he bought on Pesach, those are also usher. The things that he bought, those are not included in his mechira. He bought them after he sold to the guy. So Moshe says, those things are usher. But he says, but at least we saved a certain amount. The stuff that he had when Pesach started, that stuff is included in the mechira. Okay? So the first thing is, those two caveats, the stuff that he sells on Pesach, and the stuff that he buys on Pesach, is very good to us. Because in a supermarket, what they sell on Pesach, nobody cares about. What they sold on Pesach was someone who bought bread on Pesach. Obviously, we don't care about that. That person doesn't care about chametz on Pesach. But in our case, the stuff that they sell on Pesach was sold to my supermarket. Okay, what did the distributor sell on Pesach? So he sold it to my supermarket. So the stuff that stuff from Moshe, that for sure is usher. And the stuff that he bought on Pesach also was usher. So Rav Moshe is not going to help for a certain. And it's usher. And it's usher. It's chametz on Pesach because he stole it. When he gives it to the person.
Then he stole from the guy and sold it.
Right, so when he stole it means it's mine and I give it to you. So he made a temporary deal.
How can you do to come so much of the shelf? Big job, this guy stole it.
And so we could argue about that. Rav Moshe says that's usher. Rav Moshe says it's usher. We could argue about the technicalities of how it works and why it works. Rav Moshe says that stuff is usher. But in the true Rav Moshe, it's not important.
The guy Rav Moshe took in old-fashioned stores, and he said, "Could you please give me the guy goes to the shelf?"
Somehow I doubt it because he was
goes to the supermarket, scans it, and then
everybody assumes he was talking about Wallbaum's. But okay, maybe Rav Moshe says that. Now, in the case of Rav Moshe, it wasn't relevant. The stuff that he sold on Pesach. It was like sort of like a minor point because that stuff was a person who bought that stuff was eating bread on Pesach.
That wasn't the issue.
Right? He meant it was in passing, but for us it is relevant because by us it's a distributor, it's not a supermarket. The distributor is selling it to my supermarket. Okay, but Rav Moshe also says that the stuff that he buys on Pesach is not included in the mechira. How can it be included? How could it be included if he bought it after the mechira happened? So Rav Moshe says that stuff is also awesome. Okay, so that's one part, which is to say is the mechirim would only help for some of his stuff. Okay, some is better than none. Okay, but another point is there are many who disagree with him. Okay, many who said to Rav Moshe, who said, no, it's a joke. Come on. While the rabbi is sitting at the Mechiras chametz, while he's sitting there saying, "Go, you own all the chametz," the business is running like usual. I mean, how can anybody believe that this is real? How can anybody believe that you make a Mechiras chametz? I sold a supermarket chain that's worth $1 zillion to the janitor in my shul. I mean, how can you believe that this is for real? Everybody could tell that this whole thing is a joke. Okay, so there were a number of Achronim who disagreed with that, and contemporary people who disagreed with it.
I never heard them called Achronim.
What is it? The Maram Shik is an Achron. Okay, the Maram Shik is an Achron. And some contemporary people who disagree with it. They said, this whole thing, of course it's a joke. There's no such thing. Okay, and
they were making arrangements to give the share to profits to the guy.
I'm coming to that. And then, on top of that is that I've now heard from two different people who were closer to Moshe. Okay, I can't tell you this on my own, but I heard this from two different people close to Rav Moshe that said Rav Moshe only said this thing as a b'diavad, and for people who are stuck, we're helping them out, we're doing them a benefit, but Rav Moshe said it was not meant as a l'chadchila. Now, you don't get that impression from the tshuva. Rav Moshe said it was not meant as a l'chadchila that you should be able to buy this stuff. It was meant that helps people.
For the consumer or for the supplier?
For both. For both. It's for the person who's doing Mechiras chametz, you're helping him avoid this. So I guess it's an advantage to help him. But for the people to buy, right, you're right. It can't be for him because he's selling chametz to Pesach, right? So, but I mean, it's helping him. It's to his advantage. It's his advantage. Rav Moshe says in the tshuva, he says, don't give the guy a letter that he sold his chametz. He says, don't do that because that'll encourage people to buy from him, which they shouldn't. But these two people who have said to me, two reputable people who said that Rav Moshe said it was only as a l'chadchila, only as a b'diavad. It's not meant to be l'chadchila. So people say, well, if even Rav Moshe, who's the maker, said it's only as a b'diavad, what do I need to buy this brand? I'll go buy a different brand. Why do I need to buy this for?
You didn't buy it for the guy. I don't know. The guy, he owns chametz. The mitzvah. At home he owns chametz. He sold his store.
Yes.
So the mitzvah is still everybody bought every second of Pesach.
Yes.
So instead of having the 2 pounds, you have the.
Yeah. So Rav Moshe talks about that. Rav Moshe talks about in the tshuva that it's his advantage to have less. Yes. The less he has, the better. It's not an all or nothing. It's not an all or nothing either over or not ever. Rav Moshe, that's a big part of the tshuva is it to his advantage? Are we helping him by doing this mechira? Okay. Okay. Now.
Very nafkamina if it says in the star that the mechira is going to include even things which he purchases on Pesach.
So that's a shayla we talked about once before, not for today, whether it's physically possible to do such a thing. Is it possible to make a mechira? We talked about that once before. I'm not going to repeat that. There's a whole to-do whether that's possible. Is that physically possible to do that? And even if it's physically possible, meaning even if it's possible, does that avoid Bal Yirah? Does the way the technicalities of that happen is that when it eventually comes into my rishus, it bounces through my rishus for a second. Does it bounce through me when it eventually shows up at my supermarket? In which case, it's how much shovel anyhow. Right. Okay. So that was a different time. Okay. So now the last thing we have to talk about is like this: the people in this case try to avoid this problem, try to solve the problem by saying, we're not going to do a traditional Mechiras chametz. We're going to do a better Mechira. We're going to sell the whole company. We're going to make it that it's not just that he sold the chametz in his warehouse. The whole company's going to belong to somebody else. And if the whole company belongs to somebody else, well, then we won't care if he buys and sells stuff on Pesach, because whatever he's buying and selling belongs, the whole lock, stock, and barrel, the whole company belongs to somebody else. So we don't have to worry about these problems. It maybe doesn't look so serious, but the problems of him buying and selling on Pesach is be solved by selling the whole company. Okay? So, that's what they came up with. They said, let's do like that. Okay? So, in fact, part of the owner's apprehension about selling his company was, he said, is legally, we've heard this before, legally I can't sell my company to just a regular person. I have to sell to someone who has a special license who's allowed to own a beer distribution company. Okay? So they solved that problem by finding one of the people in his company who has a license. They said, okay, well, you'll sell it to Shmerel or to John or whatever his name was. Then he should be the guy to buy the company. So
Shmerel was his last name. John Shmerel.
Isn't
enough selling?
Well, he's selling the whole company.
I'm saying that some is that they're just investors instead of being
I don't know the legalities of it, but he said I can't do that to a person who's not licensed. Okay, so they found the guy. So that's correct. So they now all this was happening a few days before Pesach, and it all got more serious between the time that the Kashrus was delivered and the next morning when the guy was in his office. Okay, so they were sort of like stuck here in a very tight situation. So what they did was they were scrambling to get some things that they needed, and they at a certain point it found its way to Rabbi Reese. Okay, now not to Rabbi Reese directly, but Rabbi Reese is not responsible for what I'm about to say. Okay? It found its way to Rabbi Reese. They said, Rabbi Reese, you once did a mechira like this. Hey, can you help us with it? Giving us a shire. Rabbi Reese says, listen here, I'm not doing the mechira. I have nothing to do. I don't know who you are. I'm not anywhere near you. But here's some paperwork and some instructions. Okay, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to give you 2 stars and instructions of what you're supposed to do, because I've done this beforehand, you've never did, and I'm going to give you some instructions of what I want you to do.
So this mechira, the broad mechira is a valid mechira.
We're going to talk about that. Just give me a second. I can tell you. So he says, I'm going to give you this.
I'm saying if it's possible, if it's been done before, it's possible.
Potentially, okay. So he says, I'll give you all the information that you need, and then if you want to do it, you can do what you can. But I can't help you really, because I'm here and you're there, and then I can't help you. But this is what I would do. Okay. So Rabbi Reese, he showed me what he sent them, and everything was very clear and very laid out very nicely what they're supposed to do. Okay, but we'll say it was broken telephone. Will be nice and say that's what happened, and a lot of the details never made their way to where they're supposed to be. Okay, never were followed through in the way they were supposed to. So now the first thing is this idea that you could sell the whole company, which I said would avoid the problem of chametz that be bought and sold on Pesach. It would avoid that problem. But there are many people who say, just like we don't like selling the Mechiras chametz when the guy runs his business, we even more don't like when he sells his whole company. When you think about the seriousness, is it really serious that a guy is selling his whole company for Pesach? Is that really serious? So there are people who argue it's even worse than Wallbound. It's even worse than a person who does Mechiras chametz just for his chametz, because after all, Wallbound's business is to sell chametz. That's their business. So if you want to buy it all from them, if you want to walk in and say, I'm buying the whole thing at fair market price, okay, that's fine. That's their business. At least within reason that they would sell it. To see I'm selling the whole business itself, not just the stock, not just the produce, but the business itself, it seems harder to believe that it's really happening. The argument against that is, well, the person doesn't learn from Bayirah. To avoid Bayirah, he would be willing to sell his business. So that's an argument against.
I also heard that when you sell a business, it's very common for nothing to change.
What do you mean for nothing to change?
I mean that when a new owner takes over a business, they won't change anything right away.
Except I guess the profits, not the first guy.
Okay.
Slide
and therefore what?
So I'm saying the fact that not, if you're doing business as usual, so that's not...
Doesn't look strange.
Doesn't look strange.
You do this right. There's actually a store that right now is being sold, right? And it didn't stay the same, right? We saw, the shelves got all cleared off, right? But fine.
It's running the same.
It's running the same, yes. There's nothing to buy. What?
Nursing home owners who sell their nursing home for Yom Tov, for Shabbos, is any different than that?
When a person does a mechira, like a Shabbos mechira, they make a partnership. They make a partnership between them and someone who's not Jewish. So the business runs the way it's supposed to. But they sat down, they make a formal arrangement that I own it this day and you own it this day. You know what I mean? So it seems more. There's an argument that looks more real than this, which is it true? Do you think he really just sold his business for $1?
Why did they do a partnership here?
What?
Why did they do a partnership?
So it could be done. It's possible to. When there is a partnership, when the owners are really partners, the Yid and the Goy, that there's some places that the seriously gives a shkacha to, that there's partners, we say partner A, the Yid, sell out the partner B for Pesach. Okay? That's much more reasonable. I own 40%, you own 60%, so I might sell you my shares, or that's not so unusual. Okay? But there are those who argue that selling the whole company is worse than do just a traditional Mechiras chametz, because it looks even more than chuchut. Okay, maybe yes and maybe not. But that would have been its own question. But the problem was that over here was that in the shtar that Rabbi Rees prepared, that says we're going to do selling the whole company, we sell the whole company, Rabbi Rees said, we're also going to do Mechiras chametz. Okay? And there are reasons why you have to do that. And actually we have to do Mechiras chametz first. Do the Mechiras, what I call Mechiras chametz, the traditional Mechiras chametz, and then afterwards sell the rest of the company. Okay? That didn't happen. Okay, whether the kinyanim happened the way they were supposed to was not at all clear. If the right kinyan happened, maybe yes and maybe not. Okay, but then one of the important things that Rabbi Rees has in the Mechira is that you want to show that this thing, which looks a little fishy, is actually sincere. Okay? You want to show that we really mean it when we're selling the company to this person who's not Jewish, that we mean it for real. And to do that, there's two ways that Rabbi Rees does that to make sure that it looks for real. The first is the owner, the former owner, the Jew, doesn't participate in the business for the whole Pesach. Okay, Rabbi says they even know the person. He has to tell them his plans of where he's going to be for Pesach. Which just says, I'm really selling my business for Pesach, and I'm out of here. Okay, I'm on vacation. Okay, I'm out of here. Okay, and the second side is that after Pesach, they're mechuyev to make an accounting for how much money was earned over Pesach. It said this in the shtar, but how much you have to make an accounting. And then when they're finished making that accounting, they come back to the CRC and say, CRC, this is the cheshbon we came up with. They earned this much money over Pesach, this much profit, this much expenses, and this much revenue. And here's the check we're giving to the person who was the owner over Pesach. Here's the check for how many dollars of how much he earned because he owned his company. Okay, all of that lends to the credibility of the person really selling his company. He really sold it.
$1,000,000?
Whatever the share is, whatever the
What is it? A lot of money. The check was
Rega. So the guy pays, the person pays, right?
He didn't pay in advance.
So he pays in advance.
He pays the deposit. If he comes through with the rest of the money, then he'll make their reckoning.
No. He can't be. That's another problem. You can't say if he comes through with the money. when you do Mechiras chametz in the traditional way, let's say you say all the chametz in Chicago is worth $1 million. Okay, let's say that's how much it was worth. So the guy owes that much money. When Pesach is over, we say, okay, guy, now we want to buy it back from you. We'll buy it back for $1 million also. So there's an even exchange. He owes us $1 million to buy it. We owe him $1 million to buy it back. We call it quits and it's even. But when you buy a business for a week, you bought the business for all of a week. You owe me money for that week's worth.
He has to pay for it.
The buyer has to pay for it. Wait, the seller is not offering anything back when Pesach is over. So he has to really if he doesn't
profit. Okay, give me $1 million for buying the business for 8 days.
Okay.
And if when you do that, we'll make the reckoning. And if you don't want to do it, then I'll buy it.
No, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. There's no buying that.
It's not, you owe me $1 million now, but I'll
What about the business made profit during that week? What happened to the profit the business made during that week?
He never ends up giving you the money.
Wait, if he doesn't give you the money,
No, but you want to buy the business back again. You owe him $1 million. You want to buy the business back.
You give me $20.
Yeah.
And I owe you the rest of $1 million minus 20. And if you don't give it, and he has to give it. But if end of Pesach, he doesn't want to give it. He doesn't have it.
So let me rephrase what you said. There are some people who make this type of mechir, and they say this is the purchase price, and this is the purchase price. And at the end of Pesach, I have to make you a cheshbon with how much profits we earned. Because it's so complicated to make the cheshbon, it's so complicated, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that the profits were X amount. And what they do is they make the profits be, I'll give a number, $1,000 more than how much the sale price was. And then, at the end of Pesach, the Jew gives the non-Jew $1,000, saying, you bought the company for $1 million, the profits we'll make a cheshbon of $1 million and $1,000, and therefore I'm giving you $1,000 back. But at least he's giving him something for his profits. But if he says, we're not going to make the cheshbon, you're not going to give me the money.
When you come through with the money, we'll sit down and make the
No, but if
Does it come to $100,000?
he doesn't come through with the money, if we have a different problem, he doesn't come through with the money, then he never bought it.
Give it farther to $20.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, but so that was a question. That was a question I spoke to Reese about. Okay, I'll say that's up in the air at this point, which is, if I say I'm going to buy your business for $1 million, and then I don't give you the $1 million, is the mechira gone? Was it tonight? I'm buying the business if I'm going to give you the money. If I never show up with the money, maybe I didn't buy it. Maybe that's mabatul mechira. I said I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it. Finish it.
Shabbos are done this way, and it ends up being basically a joke because nobody takes it seriously. Everyone stipulates up front the whole thing is going to be a wash, no money's going to the guy's hands, and it just doesn't seem serious.
Okay.
That's why in Shabbos, even, the posting, right, you got to have like at least something, that the person's going to get per unit of work that they do. So, because Shabbos, the big issue is the nafshika, everything, just try to get something out of it, So here too, just get something out of it to show that it's serious. So
right.
We just have a small purchase price for the business over the course of Pesach, and whatever's made on Pesach, the guy who bought it is going to keep the money. They have to actually show us a copy of the check.
Right, and he actually makes sure he gets something. Okay, so then there were like little things. Just the way the star was filled out wasn't done as meticulously as it should be. That's how I'll say it. So the but.
And a lot of brackets.
Whatever.
Brackets. Purchase every bracket.
So so what it is that there were serious questions about how naniach that you could either sell a chametz or you could sell a company and therefore avoid the issue. Again, which not everybody agreed to. Those who put out the letter said, we just don't agree with that whole Shuvah Ramosha Opil. We just don't buy that you could sell chametz or even sell a company and therefore avoid by your own when the guy runs his business like regular. But even if there's such a thing, there's a way to do it, or at least the way Rabbi Reese would want it to be done. And it's not clear that we'll say nicely, it wasn't clear that it was done. It was done actually even to meet that standard, to say we actually did that.
I heard different people talk about it. They said there's a Belzer diet that was involved.
Rabbi Exim was involved. It's not clear to me. I didn't speak to Rabbi Exim. It's not clear to me how he was involved. The reason why I say it's not clear is because I was told that he was involved in the shtar, but in end they used the shtar from Rabbi Reese. So I don't know what his involvement was. What I mean is, and it didn't go through with the way Rabbi Reese said, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. He said the long list of instructions, and that didn't exactly happen the way it was supposed to. So it is.
Are you talking about only 2 weeks of concern?
No, you missed that part. No, 4 or 5 weeks of concern.
That was what I'm saying, but there's 1 week where it's the stuff that...
You missed it. I took that view. So it's 4 or 5, they hold many weeks worth of stock.
I know, but I'm saying there's 1 week when there's the gezel, right?
Yes.
And then there's another week, 5 weeks later, the stuff that they bought from Pesach.
If you hold that Mechiras chametz and the company stays open, that's good enough.
So
if you agree to that,
For Moshe, the two problems that you're having.
if you agree to Rav Moshe, I said not everybody agrees to Rav Moshe. The people put up the letters don't agree to Rav Moshe. That was the first thing.
Right, but if you agree to Rav Moshe, there's only 2 weeks of concern.
If you agree to Rav Moshe, yes, that's good. There's a floating 2 weeks out there that are concerned.
First week?
If you agree to Rav Moshe and you did Mechiras chametz.
Okay, now I'm saying if they did this Mechiras chametz.
No, if they did Mechiras chametz, right? If they would have done Mechiras chametz and they would have...
They sold the company. They didn't do the company.
Right. Okay, let's stop it.